Screen Slurps.
Hello and welcome to Screen Slurps, the movie review podcast where we discuss everything that is good, that is bad, and that is savage in the world of cinema. I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
And I am really hungry right now. Laura, get out of here.
I know, we have Chinese food just waiting for us, and I'm really excited to eat it.
But it's not time to eat Chinese food. It's time to talk about something that's far from being Chinese, even though the visuals in this movie look like they were inspired by classic Japanese.
Well, you said while we were watching it, you got like Kurosawa vibes.
Yeah,
I can see it.
I think from my research, I think it was very heavily inspired by Akira Kurosawa's classic movies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This week's movie is The Tragedy of Macbeth. And
boil, boil, toil and trouble, cauldron burn, and cauldron bubble. She didn't cackle.
All three of them didn't.
1 in 3.
If you didn't know, The Tragedy of Macbeth is a classic William Shakespeare piece, novel,
Play.
Novella.
Play.
Yeah. Let's leave it to the librarian over here.
Well, I mean, Shakespeare wrote plays.
Yeah, I guess so.
And sonnets. I mean, he did write some other things, but...
Yeah, well...
They're plays, yeah.
The Tragedy of Macbeth, it's a classic play William Shakespeare put together, and it's been going on for years now. William Shakespeare's existed for quite some time. Well, I mean, he's not around anymore, but you get the drill. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
And... Yeah. It is now a movie. It's been made into a few movies, I believe. But Joel Coen, one of the Coen brothers, he has made it into a movie now. He's made it into a brand new film, just released, actually. And we're going to talk all about the details of it, many, many details of it, very soon. But first, we're going to get into our side slurps before that. That's right, our side slurps. If you're a first-time listener, what we mean by side slurps is things we've been doing other than watching the main topic of our episode this week. It could be a television show. It could be a different film. It could be maybe we went dancing. Maybe we went moonwalking somewhere. Who knows what we're doing? I never know. Laura surprises me many times.
I do want to go dancing. Maybe once the panini's over, we'll go dancing again.
The panini?
Yeah, the pandemic, people call it like the panini.
You just made me think of Panera Bread or something. So
Red Bulls.
Speaking of, Laura, have you been eating paninis lately?
No, I haven't had a panini in a while, actually. Maybe we'll have to get Panera Bread this week.
First, we're talking about Chinese food. Now you're talking about paninis.
We're foodie people, okay? We can talk about food 24/7.
This is a film review we're having, not a panini discussion.
Eat while you watch movies.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Anyways, my side slurps for the week. For my book this last week, I read The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams. It was so good. It was a really cute, contemporary romance novel, and even just it was so much deeper than even just being just a romance novel. So it was about a plus size woman kind of coming to terms with accepting and loving her body the way that it is, So a lot of body positivity, which I loved. And yeah, it was just cute all around. A really good read. I highly suggest it for those that contemporary romance, rom-com-y kind of books. Other than reading this last week too, I mean, we've kind of started getting more involved in wedding planning. So I've been doing a little bit of research about vendors and things for our wedding and, things to make. And
because we're getting married next year.
So yeah, sending out stuff to my bridesmaids, which was a lot of fun. So now we can really get going and planning now that we actually have the menu and we know, have an idea of what we want. Other than that, I've been playing, together too, we've started playing a few more video games. I mean, as always, I play Genshin Impact a lot, but I think I'm near the end of that obsession phase. So I'll kind of dwindle down on that for a bit and I'll pick it back up maybe when they like release more stuff. But otherwise, like literally just this morning before we started recording, I started playing Horizon Zero Dawn, which looks to be a lot of fun. I think I'll like it a lot. It reminds me of a mix between like Assassin's Creed and the Tomb Raider games.
I love a great RPG game.
Yeah.
I used to be so obsessed with just diving into a good video game, a great RPG game, and just getting hooked on it. And I always love a good game where you can do some great character customization, which isn't so much in Horizon Zero Dawn.
No,
However,
not at all, but
a great RPG game with some good character customization options just gets me sucked in because I love being able to make my own character very much my own personality and then just playing the game forever.
I'm surprised you don't play around more with like the character customization in The Sims, because it's intense. You can change like every little thing.
I used to be obsessed with playing The Sims for that very reason, but not so much now. I don't really want to play The Sims right now.
Yeah. I mean, I more so play Sims for designing the houses. I don't care so much about like the gameplay. I just like to build houses. So that's like, well, the other game I got this last week, which Adam was making fun of me for, is this game on the Switch called Unpacking. And literally all you do is like, it's like you've moved into a new house or place and you unpack the boxes and put stuff away. It's very relaxing for me and I enjoy it thoroughly. But that's it, really. That's all for my side slurps. We didn't do much outside. It's been very cold here in Chicago and we had some snowstorms. So we've just kind of been chilling, relaxing. But we have some plans for things to do, you know, tonight and this next week. So hopefully on next week's episode, we'll have like more fun, you know, side slurps to talk about. What about you, Adam? What were you slurping?
Well, what I've been up to is I watched a little bit of the Olympics with Laura. The main thing we were watching originally was the ice skaters.
I love figure skating.
Yeah, there were some crazy ice skaters going on, doing some crazy tricks, some a little more theatrical than the others. And it was very intense. I can't imagine myself doing ice skating tricks like that. I don't know if I'd want to. I'd probably break a few legs. Yes, I did say few legs. I don't have 6 legs or anything, but
surprise!
It would be intense. But I'm looking forward to seeing Shaun White snowboarding.
Yeah, we need to look up the schedule and see when he's on.
Yeah. But yeah, looking forward to seeing Shaun White snowboarding and seeing what kind of tricks he still has up his sleeve in terms of flipping off the snowboard and, well, hopefully not off of it, but flipping around on the snowboard and turning around.
Yeah, it's crazy. We were just talking last night. Like, he's been in the Olympics and snowboarding for so long. What did we say? Like 2006?
He had to have been about 20 years old, perhaps.
I mean, what? It's 2012. It's like, that was a long time.
Yeah, and he's got snowboarding video games named after him, and he's got apparel that's, you know, branded after him. So
yeah, I mean, he's like equal to Tony Hawk.
He's the Tony Hawk of snowboarding.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, I would say so.
So there's that, and I'm still, after my last episode I mentioned this, but I'm still reading the book Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting and Great Audio Storytelling by Eric Nussman. Guys, it's a great book, and I promise this week I will finish that book, and I will keep you updated on the next episode of Screen Slurps. But I gotta say, definitely check it out. You will definitely learn something reading this book. I'm learning stuff. And I got to say, it is a mind opener in terms of learning stuff. I love learning stuff. So I kind of miss that about back in the day when I would be reading a lot of books. So that's my 2022 resolution. One of them, at least, is reading more books, because sitting next to Laura, she's like the library herself, and I don't read enough. So, and in addition to that, Laura and I are still watching more episodes of Bar Rescue because we are stuck in the chain of watching John.
We're almost caught up, though. So then we'll have to find another show.
Yeah, it used to be Ink Master,
which we can finish. I think there's like 1 season left. Maybe we'll finish that. I don't know. There's some other shows, though, like actual shows that we have on our list that maybe we can get to. Like,
we kind of just hop around.
Yeah.
It started as Ink Master. We almost finished it. And then we found Bar Rescue. And then we're like, ooh, let's watch all this. And then we haven't quite finished it yet, but maybe we'll find something else.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the OC.
Oh, yeah.
They got to get you into that.
Watching Peter Gallagher performing the OC.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. So I'm all in.
I'm all in.
But the main thing that we're all in for on this week's episode is The Tragedy of Macbeth, directed by Joel Coen. This movie recently released. It just came out on December 25th of last year. What a Christmas treat, everybody. The Tragedy of Macbeth by Joel Coen. And you didn't hear me wrong. It was only one of the Coen brothers that directed this bad boy.
Yeah.
To everyone's surprise, Ethan Coen has kind of backed out of the Coen brothers in terms of directing movies ever so recently. So The Tragedy of Macbeth was just directed by Joel Coen. It's based on Macbeth by William Shakespeare. As I was saying in the beginning, I know so much about William Shakespeare as I was struggling there. So William Shakespeare wrote the play Macbeth. And it's funny as I say this, but I wrote it down because Laura and I were having a little bit of a battle after we first watched the movie. But there is a credit at the end of the movie that says written by Joel Coen.
Yes.
Now, listener, take it as you would like, but...
So this is my argument, why Adam's bringing this up. My argument is that I don't think Joel Coen should have a written by credit because he did not write any of the dialogue. Shakespeare wrote it. Like, it's Shakespeare's words. He didn't change them, make them modern. Like, it's legit the original narration or dialogue from the play. So it irks me that Joel Coen has a written by credit. I think he should have like an adapted by credit, which I'm sure he did too, but I just don't think he should have a written by credit. Right. That's just me personally.
And
though.
It's the very first credit that shows up is written by Joel Coen and then adapted by, or like adapted
from William Shakespeare or whatever.
The Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Yeah. And what the real question becomes then, what does this mean? What is written by? And I guess my best interpretation of that is the film was written by, or like film, I don't know, structurally or creatively, like this
visually,
film,
sure, certainly.
But then visually, who created that was the cinematographer. I mean, he was holding the camera. He was the one creating these shots.
Of Joel Coen's
but if you want to go all the way down to the bare bones of it, it was Joel Coen who woke up one morning and was like, I am going to make a movie about Macbeth.
Right.
And so it was written by, in that sense, by Joel Coen.
I guess. This is just, it's one little thing that I'm going to stick to. And I don't know. For some reason, I just don't think he should have a written by credit. But anywho's.
Yep.
That's just me being picky.
And to continue on, the movie stars some of these actors: Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, Bertie Carvel, Alex Hassell, Corey Hawkins, Harry Melling, and Brendan Gleeson. It stars all of those actors.
And also Catherine Hunter, who played the witches, and she's like one of the best parts. So you can't forget her.
Yeah, it is a very interesting film. And just to go back to what Laura and I were saying about the whole written by premise, would like you to think about the dialogue in this movie. I think through my research, I found that they had changed one line ever so subtly. They switched around like 2 words or something like that.
Oh, from the original?
Yeah. And then I think that was really it.
So that's why he gets the written credit.
I don't even know if you can argue that.
That one line.
I don't know if you can even really argue that, though.
No, but while you're mentioning that, like the dialogue and using the original, that's one of the things I was really surprised about. Like, you and I generally don't like to look up a lot of stuff about movies before we watch them, because it's nice to go in with like no expectations or anything. So when I saw this movie being released and just even like the posters, I assumed it was going to be like a modern retelling or a modern adaptation. Like it would be set in today's time. It would have more updated lingo, speaking how we speak now. So I was really pleasantly surprised, actually, that they kept it to like original 1600 Scotland. Like the dialogue is very Shakespearean, which can be a little hard to understand what's going on at times. But it was nice to see them do like a classic, legit play, essentially.
I mean, the most knowledge I had going in was that it was going to be in black and white, and I kind of had the assumption that there was going to be a little bit of Shakespearean-esque dialogue. I didn't realize it was going to be so difficult to understand as I began watching it. And so once we started watching it, I immediately was thinking, what is going on?
And that's nothing against the movie or Coen. That's just Shakespeare in general, right? Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, he was writing in like the 1600s, I think, or something like that. So, and in England. So like in Old English, he's writing, and we just don't speak like that anymore. I was very surprised, yeah. Yeah. So I think anyone doing a, word for word retelling or adaptation, however you want to call it, of Shakespeare in today's world, anyone watching it is going to have struggle understanding it, right? It's like trying to read like the Bible or something. It's just not the same language that we speak anymore. So I do think I've read Macbeth before. I've seen, other retellings of Macbeth. So I knew like what the plot was. And I think that helped, because if I went into this fresh, like not having any idea what was going to happen in this movie, I definitely think I'd be confused. So it's like my one thing, but that, again, that's not against Coen or the movie. That's Shakespeare in general.
Yeah, I have nothing against Coen for using the original, structure of Macbeth
beautiful.
And the lingo that Shakespeare was writing in. But I got to be honest, when I first started hearing that, I was definitely confused. I think it started to make much more sense as I continued to watch it and see the acting of Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand and everyone else. Seeing how the characters were behaving certainly helped to make much more sense of the way they were talking. And it started to play out in their benefit. It started to make much more sense of what the story was about and everything. As you saw what the characters were doing, you start to understand much more. Oh, okay, this is what this means, and I can tell what you're talking about and everything. I
do think, though, reading like a quick like Spark Notes of what the plot is before
that would probably
it,
help,
because that's how too, like when I watch operas, which generally are in Italian or German, like a language we don't speak, I honestly do. That's like the one time I do want to know what's happening before I go in. So I'll read kind of like a brief synopsis of the plot, so to get, because it is hard to sometimes like interpret and understand everything that's going on when it's not really your native.
Yeah, I can imagine that would help. But like you were saying, I like personally going into movies without knowing
it's just this one's
what I'm
hard.
going to get.
This one's hard to piece together.
So as I was researching more about this film and Joel Coen directing this solo, some of the research I was doing from, I believe, a New York Times article had mentioned that Joel had sort of contemplated doing this since 2016, when he and Frances McDormand, who was his wife, asked him about directing a production of Macbeth as a play, which she had starred in.
I would say she was starring in an actual play, right, as Lady Macbeth, which is why she then was like, let's have my hubby do it also.
And I believe Joel Coen's response to that was that he had a much larger preference in making this into a feature film rather than turning it into a stage production.
Which is funny, though, because, yes, it's a movie, but it looks like a play. It looks theatrical. And I mean, he did that on purpose, like, for definitely. Exactly. But it's just interesting that he was like, no, I don't want to do a play. And then he made a movie that looks like a play. Looks like a play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's got a fantastic look to it. It has a really interesting look to it that I think a lot of directors, I don't know if I'd say steer away from, but a lot of directors don't exactly go to this kind of look in terms of production. And I think the cinematography for this film just looks fantastic.
It's a combination, though, of everything. Like you're saying, the cinematography, yes, but also the sets and the costumes and the emotion of the actors, just everything together. It, like, you feel like you are watching a play. Yeah. Which I think it was beautiful. Like, not understanding the plot aside, maybe even just watching this movie and visually taking it in is stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, the sets, it's so weird. So as we're talking about filming, this whole movie was set, like, shot on a soundstage. So I think they did like one exterior shot, which is in one of the final scenes. But otherwise, it's all done on a soundstage with these really like minimalistic but imposing sets. So everything's really tall, and like thin, and it gives me vibes of like an Escher painting, which is what I told you while watching it, that artist who does like the staircases going in multiple directions, and so you're really disoriented watching it. And I got this vibe in this movie with the sets, because it's just kind of like, what am I looking at, right? And I actually, when I was looking things up, I think it was the cinematographer that mentioned this in an article somewhere. And he was saying that, that was purposely done to create the vibe and the sets like that, to give the viewer, a confusion of like, you don't know if it's day or night. You don't know if you're looking up or looking down, like which direction it's going, which kind of adds to the mania that, Macbeth and his wife start to as they get crazier and crazier, like us watching it and feeling that way within those sets, we kind of get that sense too of that like manic mania, discombobulated kind of feeling. Right.
Yeah. It's interesting to see all of the different shapes in each of the shots, and how this is like, as you're saying, like the painting that you were referring to, that's like staircases going in all these different directions. Most of the shots that you see when watching this film are just conglomeration of shapes and shadows, light and dark. And I mean, it's black and white. They got to play with shadows and lighting, but it is just so interesting to see that it's not just, random lighting here and there. It's pretty much perfected lighting in these, nicely portrayed shapes of, like cylinders, or, like rectangles perfectly placed in perfect spots.
Well, the sets too, even like it was filmed in black and white, but even the sets were painted black and white. And they said they even painted in shadows. So though they had lighting like on the sound stages to make it more intense, they would actually paint shadows onto the sets themselves. So you would see that more so on screen. And even some like the costumes, they were saying, for the actors were, like grayscale, aside from a few dresses that Frances McDormand wore. Most of the cast was in grayscale clothing also, which I think helps.
Yeah,
like even though it was shot in black and white, it definitely gives it a lot more contrast and visually like way more interesting to watch this movie that way.
And think about how this film, although this was only directed by Joel Coen, how this compares to prior Coen brother films.
So different, right?
Yeah. As I list off some of the films that were directed by the Coen brothers, think about how this film may compare to something such as Fargo, Hail Caesar, Barton Fink, Inside Llewyn Davis. They've got a whole list of classic Coen brother films. Some other ones, No Country for Old Men, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, The Big Lebowski.
There's like a lot of variety, though, even in those movies, too. Like, as you're reading, I can kind of see some similarities with, like, Inside Llewyn Davis and this movie, but not Hail Caesar, And maybe Fargo, you can kind of see some similarities there, too. But it's interesting. I know when I was reading, like, Joel Coen said he specifically wanted to do something like outside of his wheelhouse, which is why he chose this, and I think that's good for him to do as his first solo project, right? Like really set himself apart on his own versus the work that he did with his brother.
Yeah. And I think, when you watch a film that was directed by the Coen brothers and watch this film directed by Joel Coen, I think it's very clear that you can see in their work that they've got a style that you're getting into. And even if you think that one film is different from the other, I think you can, assure yourself that there's going to be enough of a similarity that, the type of movie you're getting into is going to be like, it's like watching a movie directed by, like when you watch something directed by Quentin Tarantino, it's a Tarantino film, or you watch something directed by Martin Scorsese, it's a Scorsese film. When you watch something directed by one of the Coen brothers, it's got that Coen brother style. And I think I kind of had that same feeling watching this movie when going into it, knowing it was directed by Joel Coen. I had a sense of comfort knowing that it was directed by Joel Coen, because I don't think there's been a time where when I watched a movie directed by the Coen brothers that I was really let down. If I feel that feeling, I will let everybody know. But I think the Coen brothers really deliver a style that it's a sense of comfort that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
they definitely have more hits than misses.
Yeah,
for sure. About filming, since we have already kind of went through all those little fun facts I had, did you see too, this whole movie was shot in only 36 days?
I did not see that.
Isn't that mind-boggling? But then it kind of makes sense, right? Like, it is a play. So, look at over the last 400 years since it's been written, like people memorize it and read the whole thing or recite the whole thing in, a 2-hour play. So the actors could, if they already have some experience with Shakespeare work, which Frances had already done this as a play, so she knew the lines, and because the sets were so minimalistic, like blocking wouldn't have been as intense, right? Because he kind of had an idea, like, this is the shot I want, this is what it looks like. But still, it's just amazing to me that they did this whole movie in 36 days. That's so quick.
So let's talk about the actors for a moment. Mm-hmm. With Denzel Washington's performance, I was never really expecting him to be putting on a performance as if he was in a play, but he really delivered in this. I believe I was totally dumbfounded to see how he performed in this movie, and I thought it was very interesting.
He was so good.
And to think that it was him as the main protagonist, really, for a William Shakespeare adaptation, I thought it was really interesting to see that he would be the main character in a retelling of Macbeth. Yeah,
and I think too, generally, the idea of Macbeth is a younger man, like in his 30s, who's just now starting to like be ambitious and come to power. Because if you don't know, listeners, the point of the play is that Macbeth is told, he gets a prophecy that he'll one day be king of Scotland, essentially. So then he takes matters into his own hand, along with his wife, to become king of Scotland. And then he has to fight to keep that. And he doesn't, they die in the end. But so generally, Macbeth and his wife are like in their 30s. Like I said, he's a warrior, fighting for the previous king of Scotland. So I think it was really interesting that they had Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand play Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, because they are older, and they didn't try and hide that, right? Like, I feel like they even played that up. They really made Macbeth to be like this, in the beginning at least, seem like this wise and experienced man, and then as the story goes on, I thought it was great how you can tell how he starts to get more crazy is the word, I guess, right? Like, he looks like disheveled with his beard and things like that. So I like that they made them a little bit older in this movie.
Yeah, I think that his performance was just absolutely incredible. I mean, they really made him seem like the aged, experienced side man of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And then he takes out the king, and then he goes in the secondary position. And me not really having as much experience in William Shakespeare as you do, Laura, I'm thinking as I watch this, like, yeah, I think that's a really nice position for him to be in comparison to the king's son, which it
was like a baby,
which I think that seems much more appropriate for the story. Honestly, I think that's how the story should have been originally written, is having Macbeth be this older, more experienced secondary position to the king, where it's like, I've been here for so long, I should be next in line. Mm-hmm. Let me be there, like second in command. Like, I've been waiting in line for so long. Why am I not going to be the next one to take the king's chair and then, take the king out and be like, finally, like, I can be the king's replacement, rather than like have someone who's super young be like, I want to be king.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones must have been like, obviously it's influenced by lots of things. But, because I was just thinking, like, would Macbeth be like Ned Stark if he had lived? you know? And then after Baratheon, the original king, dies, you know, Joffrey takes over and he is young, you know, and a lot of people and inexperienced and things. And it gets me thinking now, like, I feel like Ned would have been like Macbeth. So I'm going to think more on that. But also, can we talk about Frances McDormand? Because she was amazing.
Yes.
She's good in everything. She has this quality about her that she's very like, what's the word I want? Like quirky, but in a good way. You know, she's very like ethereal, kind of. And I thought she played it so well to show the transition of her character from, you know, in the beginning trying to be like push her husband to kill the king, right? Because she's the one essentially that did. Like, Macbeth kind of was iffy, and she was like, "You better do it." Yeah. And then as the movie goes on, the play goes on, we see her kind of descent into madness because she's starting to realize what she did, and the guilt starts to take over. And I don't like that scene where she's sleepwalking when they kind of start to realize that she's losing it. Mm-hmm. She just played that so well. She's so good at playing these like off characters. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. I mean, she was just really going crazy in this, and to also see Macbeth's character go crazy during the whole dinner scene, and everyone seeing him walking off, just screaming into the sky, and seeing these illusions. Everyone's just losing their mind, except for the sane people, of course. There's a couple of them in this movie, but couple. Macbeth and his wife both just losing their minds. It's just incredible. Another character similar to Frances McDormand was Catherine Hunter, the woman who played the witches. I thought she was also probably, honestly, the best acting in this whole movie. The way that she just portrayed the witches, like in the beginning when she's like contorted, you know, like on the ground.
Oh,
just, like,
yes.
Contorted.
Bending her limbs all around.
Unnerving, yeah. And I think that works so well. And I liked that they kind of, you know, in Macbeth, there's 3 witches, and at times she is 3, but at other times she's 1. So it's kind of like this very unhuman entity. You know, you realize like this is not a witch in the sense of we think of witches, right? Like just humans doing spells or something. Like this is an otherworldly, really. And the way that she played it, just like I said, it's unnerving, but in a good way. It was just so creepy and so good. My sister played one of the witches in a production of Macbeth in like middle school or something. Fun fact.
That is crazy. That is crazy. Now, this is an interesting question to ask, but as we talk about this most recent adaptation of Macbeth by Joel Coen, how does this movie even relate to other adaptations of Shakespearean plays? Because there's been so many throughout our lives and even prior to when we were born, so many film adaptations of Shakespearean work. So I wrote down a few, but there's another adaptation of Macbeth from 2015 with Michael Fassbender in the lead role.
Is that like a modern retelling? I meant to look it up. Or is that also set in like medieval times?
I hate to say that I haven't watched
I haven't seen it either. Because so what I was going to say when you're talking about retellings, most of the ones that I've watched and loved have been modern retellings. So they're based on Shakespeare plays, but they're set in 20th century, essentially. So it's interesting because this is the opposite. You know, it is still set in old times. Right. Old times.
I think the most interesting thing about this one as well, other than the cinematography that's fantastic, is the fact that he stuck so strictly to the Shakespearean dialogue. Mm-hmm.
I think the Michael Fassbender one is also, though, set in old times.
There's also another adaptation of Hamlet, or there is a adaptation of Hamlet from 1996 that I believe is a classic adaptation of Hamlet. Mm-hmm. There's a contemporary version of Romeo and Juliet from 1996, I believe. Was that the...
Yeah, well, Baz Luhrmann.
Baz Luhrmann, Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, can I talk a second?
Oh, boy.
I love, as I just mentioned, I love modern retellings of Shakespeare plays. I think they are so good. And one of my favorites, if you've listened to this show, you know I like Baz Luhrmann anyways, or Baz. I think it's Baz Luhrmann. I love his works. Visually, I just think they're stunning and they can do no wrong. Moulin Rouge, Love it. The Romeo and Juliet is so good. So it has Leonardo DiCaprio in it. And it's like set in modern day, and it's more so about like these two rival like gang families, and it's just like dark and gritty. And it has I can't pronounce his last name, Adam. I call him Linguini. John Leguizamo. Anywho's. I love that Romeo and Juliet. There's also this movie. It had to have been like early 2001. It's just called O. And it's a modern retelling of Othello, and it's so dark, and it's like got Julia Stiles, and it's set in these kids in like college who play basketball, and just there's so many. I mean, 10 Things I Hate About You. We talked about that. That's also a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew. That's a really great movie with Heath Ledger, and again, Julia Stiles. She's in that one as well. And you know, going back to classics, even West Side Story is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and that's one of our now classic musicals. There's just so many good ones. Shakespeare, he just had a way of creating these plot lines that, like, because we're able to do modern adaptations of them, right? It's something that is like, it's not based just in one time, you know, it can be retold over and over again. Like, it's about the human experience, I guess I'll say. So I could talk about modern retellings all day long, but I'll stop. Those are some of my favorite ones, though. Yeah,
I believe you're hitting it right on the head with that. And I think with Joel Coen's adaptation of Macbeth, I think he's really keeping the viewer on the edge of their seat as they watch this. I could go on about why, but we'll keep going here. I think especially with the audio too. I think with the audio as well in this movie, the sound design and things like that, it's nothing too crazy, I gotta say, from my experience watching movies with intense sound effects and sound design and things like that. I don't think there was really a moment as I was watching this that was really like, you know, what's that crazy sound effect that's happening? It's because what I was so immersed in was the dialogue that I was watching and trying to follow and things like that. But I think what really was keeping me along in terms of audio was the orchestral music and things like that kind of chained along with the dialogue and with the scene by scene that was going along. And it really works. The music that goes with the scenes, and obviously the sound effects that were required in each scene that would happen, whether that be, you know, someone using their sword or
the birds,
things like that. They were fantastic. They used just the right kinds of sound effects for this movie and just the right amount and type of music for this movie to make it just the right amount of audio for the time period and the feeling that you'd want the viewer to feel when you're watching this. So
yeah, I mean, Carter Burwell was the composer for this movie, and he's a longtime collaborator with the Coen brothers. He's worked with them a lot. So I think that helps, right? He's worked with them forever. He knows how they work, what they want. Side note, he also was the composer for Twilight. Which is fun.
That's exactly what you want to feel in Macbeth.
But right? I agree with what you're saying. I think the music in this movie is like ominous. It's like an ominous, like low ongoing thing. But every now and then we get these like jarring bits of like the birds or, you know, some like violin noise or something, right? When there's a moment where it puts you on edge. And I think that's done really well. And I'm sure that's how the music is done if you actually see this as a play, as a production, because they would only have, you know, like an orchestra maybe, and then just like the sound effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't need over-the-top music for the entire movie, and you wouldn't want that anyways if you're trying to pay attention to the dialogue and you really want to be paying attention very intently to what's going on. You wouldn't want to be distracted by a whole score that's overtaking the scene, right, unless there's a very special moment where that needs to really hit you. So I think it really works for what's going on in this movie. And from that, I think it's time we jump into what some other people are thinking as we jump into the reviews here. From the particular review site Rotten Tomatoes, we are going to say what some other people are thinking. Rotten Tomatoes is telling us 93% from the critics, 79% from the audience.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I can't say I am surprised from that.
I mean, I'm sure the audience score is lower because of the dialogue, the language. Would be my guess.
that would also be my guess as well. You know, if I was a standard audience member going to a movie theater, thinking I'm going into a regular movie, and then sitting down and hearing Shakespearean dialogue, I would probably fall into that
by nine eyes
percentage. Yeah.
By the pricking of my thumbs.
Why can't they just have
Something
Shakespearean dialogue in some action movie or something? Do the movie Speed with Keanu Reeves and some Shakespearean dialogue.
Oh, Lord. I don't think so.
By thine eyes, slow down this bus.
There wouldn't be a bus. This motorized vehicle.
Slow down thine steed so we don't run over those people.
Yeah, I don't know. The scores, like I said, they don't surprise me. I feel like that's pretty on par. I do think this movie is going to get nominations for sure for the Academy Awards. It's something critics love and eat up.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And I'm going to make a wild guess that this is definitely going to be up for Best cinematography.
Picture. Oh, cinematography too. Well, yeah, I think too. Denzel and Francis will probably get lead actor, actress noms too. So.
Yeah, I think so. And with that being said, Laura, would you give this one a slurps up or slurps down? Listener, if you haven't heard our show before Laura starts to speak, slurps up is us recommending this movie. You go check it out. We think that you should see it, and we think that it is worth watching. And slurps down means we think this movie is garbage. Laura, do you think this movie is garbage? Do you think it's not worth watching? Or do you think it is a go?
Definitely a slurps up. I mean, if you know me, as Adam has said many times, I'm a booky person, right? And I think that regardless of this movie, Shakespeare is a very important part of, human history. And I think his plays should be read. So, and a lot of people won't read because it is, reading and his dialogue and whatnot. So I think watching this is a great way to experience that and to learn about that part of history if you don't like reading. Plot aside, as we said, visually this movie's stunning. So if you're a film nerd and just want to look at something that looks nice, like this is definitely one of the movies to turn to. And the acting for everyone. I mean, we didn't even get to most of the characters in this movie, like Macduff, and Malcolm, who is Dudley Dursley from Harry Potter, and like the Ross, I think is the character's name. I called him like the Snake Man because he kind of looked a little snaky in his outfit. Yeah. And Banquo, like there's so many characters and really important parts of this movie that we didn't even touch upon, and just the acting overall is like superior. So definitely a slurps up from me. What do you think, Adam? You feel the same?
I would definitely have to say I agree on this. I would give this movie a slurps up. And I think simply my recommendation is because for a couple reasons, actually. First off, it's Joel Coen directing this thing. And if you haven't already watched the rest of the Coen brothers library, then put this one in the rest of the library as well for the to watch movies that you want to watch, because Joel Coen is not going to disappoint you. And it's just one of those things where it's worth watching for that very reason alone. Second of all, I think from a technical point of view, the cinematography in this movie is absolutely phenomenal. And as I was watching this movie and trying to understand the dialogue, with that aside, I was so drawn into this movie visually, shot by shot. I think that my mind was just ready to explode like a time bomb from how it's just the metaphor of being mind blown. My eyes were just amazed by how beautiful this movie was. So seeing every single shot in this movie and how beautiful each and every single shot was, I cannot stress that enough, that I would recommend watching this movie just because visually it just looks so good, and every single actor and actress's performance in this movie is to go along with the dialogue and the fact that they're performing it like it is a play. It's just incredible. It's just incredible to see that in a movie. And with that being directed by one of the Coen brothers, by Joel Coen, it all just factors into like an anomaly of a movie. So I think for that very reason alone, if someone or multiple people want to think that this isn't a perfect movie, that's fine. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it's definitely worth watching. It's something you don't see every day. It's cool. It's something different. So it's not like every other action movie or thing out there. It's not necessarily an action movie. I mean, it's just like, it's like watching a play.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And so it is. I will say, like, my one caveat, you know, if you don't have experience with Shakespeare or you don't know the story of Macbeth, I do think it would be though usually I would not say this. In this instance, I think it would be beneficial to read a quick synopsis so you kind of know what's about to happen, because it is a little bit confusing if you go in blind and don't have any experience on Shakespeare. I mean, I have experience on Shakespeare and I still was like, wait a minute, what exactly is happening? But you pick up on it.
Definitely get a bowl of popcorn, prep yourself, open your eyes, and be ready. I definitely give this one a slurps up. With that being said, that wraps it up for this episode of Screen Slurps. Be sure to follow us on social media at Screen Slurps on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Ghana, or just about any other podcast streaming service out there. If you enjoy what you hear, slide on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. It will help us a lot. And if there's any crazy movies you want to hear about, let us know. Leave a comment on one of our social media pages, and trust me when I say we will be sure to talk about it. So closing out, I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
Slurps up, and we will catch you later.
Later.